times throughout the universe I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
Couldn't put it better myself. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, identities, and creeds, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. And today we take a trip into the most chaotic, most darkest corner of the universe as we take a trip into the Time War. But nowhere better to start in the Time War than Gallifrey. So to start you off, this box set starts off by basically giving us a little insight into the Time Lords having a foreshadowing feeling that the Time War is on the verge of happening. In the current state of affairs, they've managed to keep it at a very big distance as the Celestial Intervention Agency has foretellings of what's about to happen. But Gallifrey is arguing with its politics on what it should and shouldn't do. And it gets to the point where Romana and Narvin start questioning who their allegiances should be to. Their own agency, their own organisation, or maybe, just maybe, themselves. The second story in this first box set is called The Obscura. And basically it's a space station in which Braxatul, the Doctor's brother, has found a bunch of dead Daleks, and he believes them to be some piece to the puzzle on what's about to happen. He takes an ex-companion of the Doctor's, Ace, who's been studying at the academy, and they both go on this trip to this Obscura to find out the answers to what's happening. It turns out that little by little the Daleks have been breaking through some barrier in the universe and been finding their way in. Too scared for Ace's own safety, Brax decides to chuck Ace out of the Time War and send her back to Earth in order that she will not have to fight in the conflict, after he already has a foreboding sense of what's about to happen. The Devil You Know is the third installment in this box set, and it takes a trip where the Master has been incarcerated by the Time Lords for some reasons. And it turns out that he has become their last hope in hopefully turning the tide and avoiding the events of the Time War. But little to their knowledge do they realise the Master has his own intentions. He is sent out into a planet with Leela in order to find out what this weapon the Time Lords have used has done. And he learns when they get there that the chaos has caused a soldier to be relapsing his memory, living his death over and over. He's already dead, but he doesn't realise it, and his doppelganger is an incarnation of himself who threatens his own stability in space and time. The Master and Leela have an argument, and then the Master decides to flee, knowing that he has seen the cause and the destruction the Time Lords can already cause, and it starts to make him question whether the Time Lords are really fit to be fighting in a war as great as this. Desperate Measures, the fourth installment in this first box set, I've got to say, is when you really start to see the Time War diverge into its chaos at its highest climb. Daleks have started savaging more and more worlds, and the Time Lords are holding on by a thread. They know they must do something, but there's very little they can do. And so a plan is devised to resurrect one of their most ruthless dictators, someone the whole race begins to deem a god. And even more than that, Rassilon shall be resurrected. They decide to resurrect Rassilon, and Narvin and Romana, knowing how brutal and how heartless the king of Gallifrey was, aren't intent on him returning, knowing that having him in the war could be a good thing, but also could be a very bad thing. The first episode of the second volume of Gallifrey Time War, Havoc, shows us really the control Rassilon has over the people of Gallifrey. He has his own security service. He starts to make a whole war council question themselves and even the intent of how far the CIA can work in coalition with his new armed forces. Rassilon doesn't trust anyone, and little does he trust his children of time. To make matters worse, within this first story, he now has someone from the future claiming that things get worse and worse. And to snort out this little fire of rebellion, Rassilon has someone put in charge to silence this person, in meaning so that the Time Lord can never fully tell people the truth of Rassilon's rule. Second story in the second volume, Partisans, is a testament to the Time Lord's effects on other worlds and other planets, and how their whole system of non-intervention has really gone out the window. The Time War is raging on, and the people of a planet called Eusalus are about to be hit with a wave of absolute chaos. The Time Lords don't care, and they see the planet as a casualty, as the War Council keeps arguing on whether or not these people are allies to the planet of Gallifrey. The third story in this box set, Collaterals, shows Narvin going to the planet that we previously mentioned and tries to find a way and a solution to seeing a way around the problem. But soon he learns that the Time Lords really don't care and will do anything in their power to win over the enemy, even if innocents get hurt. The final story in this box set, Assassins, follows Romana and Narvin contemplating what to do with the Lord President and his new power of office. Rassilon has seized so much power and has so much power over the war that it makes them question whether or not he's a good leader. It gets so far as that Romana even goes to the Prime Minister with a solution to get rid of Rassilon once and for all, hoping to assassinate the president. But to achieve this, she uses other means from other universes. She finds a creature in another universe that are like robots that she has sent through the time vortex to get into Gallifrey's capital in hopes that they will manage to assassinate the president without her having to do the dirty work herself. But it turns out that it comes down to the point where her and the Prime Minister are face to face, alone with Rassilon after the distraction, and Romana gets ready to shoot her own president. Of course, though, she fails, and this backfires and costs her and Narvin their place on the planet Gallifrey. Prime Minister is given a pardon by the Lord President, as he has already predicted this. Yes, Romana did hurt him, but this just gave Rassilon the ability to regenerate into a new incarnation. His dictatorial status grows higher and higher, especially with his ego. Exiles Narvin and Romana, but turns all of the people on Gallifrey into soldiers, ready to fight his war at all costs. In Volume 3, Hostiles, after being exiled from Gallifrey by Lord Rassilon himself, Romana and Narvin find themselves in a crashing TARDIS, a broken one at that. They seem to have been given this TARDIS on purpose in hopes that they would get trapped in the heart of a dying star. But Narvin and Romana use their tech skills to rewire the TARDIS and survive the collision course, instead landing and crash landing on a derelict rock, with their only company being ghosts. It turns out that they have found themselves in the company of two people, but the two people don't realize they're trapped in a paradox. Upon arriving up at a house on the hill, Romana starts speaking with an old woman who at first she assumes to be the people in the house is grandmother, only to learn that she is the wife of one of the ghosts. She is the wife to the ghost, and she can no longer stop seeing the chaos that's happening around her. She is stranded in this paradox where she keeps watching herself give birth to her first child, even though she knows that one day it will die along with her husband. This really starts to show the horror of the Time War, especially to watch someone who is stuck in a single moment, a single singularity, and never able to escape. Next story in this box set, called Nevermore, follows Narvin and Romana escaping the house that I previously mentioned, but finding that they are in much graver trouble than they might have at first thought. The planet seemed dead, but little do they know they are now being hunted down by bounty hunters who are going to do everything in their ability to hunt down the Time Lords. This kind of fills them with a little bit of relief because at first they thought that the worst thing in the Time War was the Daleks, but obviously the Time Lords have way more enemies than they first thought. Story Mother Tongue follows Leela being trapped in the vortex after an incident in the Time War. She seems to have slipped into a parallel universe in which she has taken on the body of another woman with the same name. This other woman has a child, and this child is going to grow up to be a great leader alongside a brother slash friend of his. But sadly, in Leela's case, she trains the boy to be a warrior because that is how she grew up. But she doesn't realize the effects that teaching him to be a warrior and to be heartless is going to have. He causes chaos and eventually ends up killing himself in an absolute shade of shame. Leela keeps going back in time though to try and prevent it from all happening, but in doing so she creates a similar paradox in which the boy never lived. He was never born. Or more to the point, he had an accident at some point in his time stream. The final story in this box set, Unity, shows us going to the planet Unity, a derelict rock in which Romana and Narvin are on their last hopes of finding their friend. Upon landing on the planet, they come across Leela, but she seems to be rather Mad Max sort of style. She's been fighting on this rock for ages and is ready to finally get her own back. Romana tries to convince her to come back with them and fight Rassilon, but Leela will not have any of it and doesn't want any part of the war. As the Daleks begin to close in, and they find out that the only way off of the planet is a Time Lord scout ship, Anna decides to take the ultimate sacrifice and sacrifice herself to the Daleks in hopes that the others may escape. Leela doesn't want to leave her, but Romana has to trick Leela by saying that she's going to use a chameleon arch in order to escape the Daleks' detection and become human. Romana was never really going to do this, but she knew that it was definitely an option she had to consider. Narvin and Leela escape, but just by the skin of their teeth. At the end of this, we're left on a cliffhanger of believing that Romana is exterminated. The fourth and final Gallifrey Time War box set really starts to get us to see the horrors that Rassilon has come up with just to win the Time War. First of these horrors comes in the form of a deception field in the episode Deception. It turns out to scare the Daleks off and scare anyone who dares oppose the planet Gallifrey. Rassilon has come up with these kind of mess mazes of reality in which a void is created and it starts to drive anyone who's trapped inside of it mad. He believes by creating these fields, and of course it will prevent the Daleks from getting anywhere close to Gallifrey. But little does he realise, by not giving everyone the full ability of knowing where these fields are, a lot of Time Lords and Time Lord agents have gotten trapped within the chaos. Next story, Disillusion. We follow Narvin and a boy called Rayo, who was with Leela. Rayo doesn't trust Narvin much, and you can't really blame him. He hasn't known Narvin for very long. But Narvin takes him back to his home world, his home sector, in hopes that he will be able to instill knowledge into the boy and not make him have to fight in the Time War. Narvin points out that the place he grew up, he used to believe it to be very, very dim viewed, but as he's matured as an adult, Narvin has soon come to realize that all the things he was being taught, all the beauty he took for granted, really was worthwhile. Third installment story, The Beyond. We begin to dive into this idea of reality that is constantly collapsing in on itself. It turns out that Braxitil has gone to the place in which Romana was supposedly executed and saved her. We don't quite know why he chose to save Romana, but we can guess it has something to do with the Doctor. After saving her, the pair of them wander over and over through this beyond reality, watching as the constant star and chasm of this whole event keeps collapsing in on itself. Their only chance to escape is to take another TARDIS, but the problem is every second they get anywhere closer to the TARDIS, the reality folds back in on itself, and time stops slipping away. The final story in this installment, Homecoming, is a testament to all of these stories. Rassilon is fighting with the Dalek Emperor, who is ready to break through the shields of Gallifrey and finally start his final attack. Rassilon isn't going to let it happen though, but little does he know that his children of time are plotting against both sides in hopes to end the war once and for all. They aim to use a TARDIS as a bomb to destroy the vortex, stopping the Time Lords and the Daleks once and for all. But upon getting to Gallifrey and trying to pursue this plan, they learn that it's not really optional, as destroying it would only affect the Time Lords, not the Daleks in turn, as the Daleks have used a different technology to travel through the vortex. The plan fails and the Daleks back off, but of course, there comes another cost. Narvin and Leela escape this madness, but Romana isn't so lucky, and instead Romana is decided to be trapped between a point in time where space is part of its past. Romana is told that she will walk in the past histories of Gallifrey, never to be allowed to escape, never to be allowed to go home. Rassilon leaves Leela only one option, and that is to fight alongside the Time Lords or be banished like Romana. Leela doesn't like this idea and is very heartbroken that she loses her friend in this, but she does agree to Romana's terms in hopes that she will be able to prevail and go forth in all of her beliefs. Rassilon finally decides it's time that he should go forth and unleash more and more into the war in hopes of destroying the Dalek menace once and for all. What did I think of all these different versions of the Gallifrey Time War and each of their boxes? Well, I like the way that Rassilon has slowly kind of dug himself into the history of the Time War, and I like the way that he's really at the foothold and control of everything and every possibility that's happening. I also love that in the very first couple of box sets, we get to watch as everything that Gallifrey has built has been kind of crushed under Rassilon's foot. I also, by the end of these box sets, could see why the Doctor, when we get to the TV show, absolutely does not like Rassilon. It's not that he doesn't like his history and doesn't respect everything that he has done before, but I can see that his big major issue being with Rassilon is this idea that every other species is insignificant to Rassilon unless they are Time Lords. To make matters worse, I can see why the Doctor eventually on the TV show chucks Rassilon off of Gallifrey when you find out that Rassilon was so willing to go so far in this time war that he would send any of his own people in TARDISes as kamikaze pilots just to win a battle. he had no remorse for his own kind, and he had no remorse for everything that he does and the horrors he inflicts on the people and the planets and the societies. At the end of the day, I can see when we get to Night of the Doctor why a lot of species may consider the Time Lords to be just as bad as the Daleks. Not in the Time Lords' own fault, of course, but after all the things and all the carnage that Rassilon has committed. And for that reason, I give Gallifrey Time War a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in another Doctor Who review.